I want to, we have one more presentation. The most patient man in the world, Mike Manning, has been sitting here from the, he is the chair of the Friends of the Harborwalk, which is an offshoot of the Boston Harbor Association. But basically it's a friends group that looks over all of the Harborwalk, which is a huge network of walks, not just in the North End, but elsewhere. And there are two things that he's going to give us an introduction to Friends of the Harborwalk, but also we have, we're sort of trying to figure out how to have a Harborwalk tour, the North End part of the Harborwalk, sometime in December or maybe later if we can't get our act together for September. And so that's going to be part of it too, and we're actually looking for volunteers to help on that. So Mike, take it away.
Great, thanks Ford. Good evening everyone. I'm a South Boston native. Came here tonight looking for the best calamari in the North End, so if anyone has a recommendation for me, take it forward. Thank you. Recently there have been substantial changes in the Boston Harbor Association. Many of you probably know Vivian Lee. She was with the organization for over 2 decades. She took a new position in Pittsburgh, so she's relocated. Julie, her number 2 person, is now Julie Wormser. She is now the executive director of the Boston Harbor Association. Julie has asked me to lead the Friends of the Harborwalk, which I've agreed to. My soccer and coaching days are over as my daughter is heading on to college, so I've got some free time. And just being a Boston native, I really spent a lot of time on the waterfront and really want to take my spare time and educate tourists, but also other Bostonians about the aspects of the Harborwalk. For those that don't know, the Harborwalk originates at the Chelsea Creek on the border of East Boston, Chelsea, winds its way through Charlestown, the North End, Boston proper, South Boston, Dorchester, and actually winds up on the Quincy-Dorchester line right into the Quonset River. It is 46.9 miles. We give tours throughout the summer and sometimes the winter on a 2-hour tour of a segment. I've done personally tours of South Boston, Castle Island, the stretch of beach from Carson Beach all the way to the JFK Library. Our tours are usually subscribed to within, I'd say, 3 hours. They're posted on the web. People sign up. We limit it to 50 because we know about half of them will drop off due to whatever reasons. So our tours are usually 25 attendees. I can tell you during the summer, most of the attendees were from all over the United States and actually internationally. But in September through October, the membership of the group really changes. It's really local Bostonians. So we had reached out to Ford, and Ford's been great. He's attended our meetings. Our meetings are every other month, the 3rd Thursday at the Boston Harbor Association, 374 Congress Street, right in Boston. And we talked about having a joint tour. I've also talked with Boston by Foot for having a joint tour in the spring. An engineering tour of the Big Dig, 3rd Hubbard Tunnel, so on and so forth. But for the North End, we wanted to do something, if we could, around the holidays, and I know you have an existing shopping tour in December. Maybe we do something a little different in January, where we could bring probably 30, 35 tourists into the North End. We definitely talk about the Harborwalk and how it connects to the North End. But then if we could have a couple of volunteers from this organization that could really educate the group on the parts of the North End that I don't know about. I know about Regina's and I know about various other things, but having a local North Ender lead the tour, I think, would go a long way in educating the group. When I give the tours in South Boston, just having grown up on L Street, my family is still there. You know, I can give just some background, personal background of growing up in South Boston. I think if we could have something from the North End, that would go a long way of making this a really personalized tour and really invite people to come into the North End. Any questions?
You said the Harborwalk is 74 miles?
No, it's 46.9, so let's call it 47. Now, if you measured from East Boston to Quincy, of course, that's not 47 miles. But if you walk every wharf, every pier, every nook and cranny from East Boston to the Dorchester-Quincy line, it comes out to approximately 47 miles.
My question was, is it uninterrupted or?
The largest interruption is Logan International Airport, and that's due to security reasons after 9/11. The only major one. Because we have the state regulation, Chapter 91, that really governs what private and public entities can do on the waterfront and not block access to the general public.
There are a couple of other, like South Boston, the container ship.
Conley, yeah, the
Yeah.
Conley terminal off of First Street. It's unfortunately fenced by Massport with a large concrete fence, which isn't really akin to a good tour. But if you skip that, you come right to Castle Island, which is just a treasure trove of history and interest. Someone else have a question back there?
The space for cyclists and walkers, is that a problem in other neighborhoods? Our neighborhood, there's going to be a raised bike path going along Commercial Street and dip behind the hockey rink and go under the bridge. And there should be dismount at different stages. I really foresee that there could be real issues between the pedestrians and the cyclists who are using it, not even just for pleasure, for commuting. So have you encountered this, and do you speak to the bike folk over at City Hall?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, that's a good point. We just had a tour of East Boston. We did Clipper Ship Wharf, the plan for Clipper Ship Wharf and so on and so forth. We did have a large group. Fortunately, we didn't run into any bicyclists or vice versa, but I could see in the north end that could be a real issue. So maybe for this tour forward, we could downsize even more and keep it maybe 15 or 20 versus 35.
Well, I wasn't thinking of the tour. I was just thinking of safety for all of us who continue to enjoy the water. So do you think the bike folk at City Hall will have a discussion, especially dismounts on certain parts of the path?
They should, and again, just starting in June, I just haven't had an opportunity to reach out to City Hall to talk about the possibility of bike and pedestrian collisions and so on and so forth.
One thing I'm going to say is, I've been to some of the meetings, as Mike mentioned, and I would encourage folks who have time. It's a great organization. There are a lot of very active volunteers. In fact, a lot of volunteers and young people coming in from Cambridge and other communities because people just love the Harborwalk from all around. But I think the Friends of the Harborwalk, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but it's more of a sort of a booster group, like a park support group that's trying to make sure that there's adequate funding and signage and stuff like that. When it comes to traffic issues and stuff like that in the north end, or the north end part of the Harborwalk, I think we still will need to make our voices known as NURA that perhaps we're worried about this bike lane going over the same places as the Harborwalk. And we certainly will work in concert with Mike's group, but I do think when it comes to talking to City Hall and talking to the bike group, the neighborhood associations are going to be very important still in doing that. And we can't expect that Friends of the Harborwalk that's going to be their main goal, because they're trying to get started and trying to do some fundraising, trying to organize some events. That's mainly what I've seen as I've come to the government.
Right. It's really raising awareness of this 47-mile route through Boston, getting more people involved in it. We're all volunteers. We're meeting with the VRA tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. to discuss more and better signage throughout the Harborwalk. But our mission is really to raise awareness of really what I consider a jewel in the crown of a walkway system.
So one thing that,
Just one thing. If you're meeting with the VRA, perhaps you might mention the poor state of the Harborwalk that runs around the perimeter of Lewis Wharf. And it would be great if the VRA would force the property owner to develop the Harborwalk as it's supposed to be.
Oh, you mean the abandoned piers there?
Yeah,
yes.
But what I'm talking about is not the abandoned piers. What I'm talking about is the Harborwalk is supposed to be pleasant and usable and attractive, and
right.
Property owners are supposed to see to it that the Harborwalk on their property is in that condition, and it isn't in that condition around the perimeter of Lewis Wharf. And there's been a lot of discussion at recent meetings here about the fact that the property owner there now is not doing what he's supposed to do. Fill the Normandy or the Normandy companies.
Sure.
So when you're talking with the PRA, you might just mention that. That's a joke.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
David.
Well, it's always been unclear who has any kind of authority to force the property owners to do what's right. The DRA's authority, I think, is also limited. Most of the requirements for Harborwalk, I think, are in the Chapter 91 licenses.
Correct, yes.
Many of these properties, Harborwalk came after the 91 licenses for those developments, so there may not even be any of those. And then you got to go to the state to enforce the Chapter 91 license, which is a difficult thing to do too.
Right.
So it's to get changes, it's going to be a very hard struggle. But changes are needed because I did an assessment of our Harborwalk a few years ago. I walked the whole thing. I took copious notes with all my own criteria. I didn't have kind of guidance from the Boston Harbor Association at the time. But there were deplorable conditions along most of our Harborwalk in the North End. A lot of it, you don't even know whether you're on the Harborwalk or not on the Harborwalk.
Exactly.
You get on the Harborwalk and then you lose track of where it goes.
Right, and that's why we have this meeting. The meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. is strictly a signage meeting because
Signage is important.
Yes.
But structural, aesthetics or structural form is important too. People need to be, not just follow the sign, people need to follow a waterfront path. And so there has to be some design standards built in too. Also, the only point I'm going to, so that's how bad things are and how difficult it will be to change them. But one overriding issue I always said with the Harborwalk is that having a path, and only a walking path, is not good enough. Not on our waterfront. And Chapter 91 certainly gain a lot more than that from property owners, especially owners that redevelop their properties. It should connect waterfront destinations, not just be a path to a path to a path, but a path that links waterfront destinations, and we don't have enough of those destinations along our waterfront.
I think I might have found my newest volunteer.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, don't take him away. He's a very busy man. Victor's going to ask a question, but I just want to tell everyone our main goal here in having Mike talk is to introduce the Friends of the Harborwalk and then talk about this tour that we're trying to organize, because their main mission is awareness. So this tour is very important, and I know a couple of people want to ask about Chapter 91 and public policy, what should the Harborwalk be. That's really not what we're trying to talk about right now. And so I will let you ask your question, hoping that it's about
nothing to do with that.
And also, we are looking for colorful people who know something about the North End, who might give a tour. So I'm hoping at the end of your question, you'll be a volunteer.
Because, well, it depends on how the question is answered.
All right, okay.
I am not clear. If the purpose is to promote the Harborwalk, to introduce it to people, to explain it to them, to get them to use it, what can a North End resident add to that? That is, what else is going on as an objective of this tour that North End residents are being asked to fold into?
When I give a tour of South Boston, I really talk about the community that I was born and raised in with my 5 sisters and so on and so forth. And I talk about the changes of the neighborhood, how it's changed through the 60s, 70s, 80s. I'm looking for, I just don't want someone to give a speech, Victor. I want someone to really, from the neighborhood relate to.
Okay, maybe my question isn't clear. It should be, what has the neighborhood got to do with it? If the objective is promote the Harborwalk, promote the Harborwalk.
Because your community is part of the Harborwalk.
No,
as is South
the
Boston.
Harborwalk is part of our community, but.
Well, but that's it. It's the same thing.
Well, it seems to me that it spills,
that
If
what
you-
they
if-
asked to do spills over into something that, I don't know, but I want to talk to a lot of tourists.
Okay, then you will be a volunteer.
From middle America.
But what?
No, I did.
We got out of that one.
That was well executed, Victor. Yes.
There's a group called the North End Historic Society. Historical Society.
Yep.
Maybe you should talk to them.
Sure. I'd be
They've
happy.
done a film, and they have all kinds of records of what used to be, including when the chairman spoke in the last.
They do. All right. Maybe Ford can.
Yeah, so I would just want to, we need to adjourn because we're going to be kicked out of this room. As most of you know, we get kicked out at 9 o'clock. And we have been, we've been kicked out before too. But I want to say, if anyone is indeed interested, if anyone doesn't have those fundamental objections that Victor does of the bleed between the Harborwalk and the neighborhood, and anyone wants to volunteer and speak to Mike, if you can stick around for a little while, we could have people talk to you. You know, I think having one or two of these tours with some folks that can tell some story about the North End, you know, and the molasses, I think is cool. I just found out from NBTA electricians that they cannot access the electrical conduit from the NBTA substation at Lincoln Wharf all the way to North Station because the pipes are still filled with molasses. And I was like shocked to learn that. So,
Thanks, Ford. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Thank you very much, Mike.